everyone. Welcome to Crime in Court. This is the 1996 Menendez brothers retrial. We're reading through the transcript of California versus Erik and Lyle Menendez on trial for the homicides, the 1989 homicides of their parents, Kitty and Jose. They had a trial in 93, which led to a mistrial for both of them. And as we all know, this 1996 trial led to their conviction. They received life without the possibility of parole, which was just recently overturned or resentenced by Judge Michael Jessic, a Superior Court judge in LA County, after reviewing their resentencing case. So we are very fortunate that that is the case. They have parole coming up. It's been moved or pushed back to August. I think it's 21st and 22nd. And that'll give them a little bit more time to prep and be ready. So that was at their request to push it back. And so they are all good there. So let us get started. We left off with, we are on the state's case part 31 now. In part 30, we left off with the forensic pathologist. We're probably going to do another one or two parts besides this one on him because he's on the stand for several days. We are also going to, after him, we're going into, oh, what's his name? I forgot now. uh Dr. Roger McCarthy. He's actually from that what's that company? Hold on. Let me figure it out. Failure analysis. I was going to say forensic analysis. That's not right. So the next witness after Dr. Lawrence that we're listening to his testimony, we're on cross right now with Ms. Abramson doing the cross for Erik. So the forensic pathologist is talking about the wounds, although he's apparently an expert in ballistics and all sorts of other things. But he's talking about the wounds, and this person, Roger McCarthy, who is going to be on for failure analysis after him, is going to be talking about the ballistics and things like that, and the biomechanical engineering type of thing. He's an engineer with failure analysis, so that's going to bring it all together, and that's going to end the state's case. So we are almost done, I promise you. Just a little bit longer with the state's case, and then we will move on to the uh, defense's case, which will be more interesting, I think. All right, so let us pick up where we left off, and we are still in the middle of excuse me, cross, and she was changing topics here, but we're looking through different x-rays and slides and things, and she's asking Dr. Lawrence to identify certain things on these x-rays. So let's just dive in right where we left off. All right, so Ms. Abramson says, now let's move on to the diagrams. Oh, by the way, this is an x-ray of Mr. Menendez's left femur. What is communicated? No, sorry, commuted, a commuted, commu, com, comminuted, comminuted fracture. I don't know. I don't know. I'm not saying it right, I'm sure, but whatever that word is, she's asking what kind of fracture that is, and he says it means broken into many pieces. So this means pieces or three major pieces. So that's not many pieces, correct? Well, it depends on one's interpretation. It's certainly several. Technically, that's not a comminuted fracture. No, I would say technically it's not. And I think I've already asked you this. You're not aware. There's no pellets observable anywhere near the break. No, just some tiny fragments of metal. And is it your belief that that bone was directly hit by a pellet or pellets? Yes. And that's because you don't know of any other way the bones can break after a gunshot wound. Is that correct? Well, there are metal fragments indicating that the pellets hit something hard as they went through, stripping off some of the metal. And also, as we said earlier, gunshot wounds don't break bones unless the bullets or missiles actually strike the bone. That's your belief? That's my belief. And you're not aware then of research done by other people that shows that bones break due to the cavitation pressure we've been talking about? I'm not aware of such research. By the way, we are on November 7th. If you guys are following along in the links below, there's links to the documents below. So he says he's not aware of any of that research. She says, I want to show you another one of these diagrams. This one, I'm sorry, Judge, what's the next in order? He says 222. She says, thank you. This one is called Shot 4A. Do you know what that purports to be? It shows the shot to Mrs. Menendez's right face. You see the way the head is facing in that? Yes. That's not the angle that you believe existed, is it? No. So it's close, it's a little off. Let me show you one of these then, or this one then. Look at 4B. Look at that angle. It's hard to tell in 4B how her face is turned. Well, we assume that the dummy wasn't moved between the two shots. As I say, it's hard to tell from this view. It looks as if the diagram shows the angle a little bit further off to the right than my doll does. And that's both of them showing that? Yes. So with respect to 4A and 4B, would it be fair to say you cannot agree with this angle in here? I disagree with it slightly. The court says, do you want to mark the other one 223? Ms. Abramson says, I do, Your Honor. And I'm going to make a small X to show you don't agree. Now, let me show you these two diagrams. I'm going to mark them 224 and 225. First, I'd ask you to look at them to see if you can figure out what they're supposed to show. They show Kitty Menendez being shot in the right arm and upper arm while she's lying on her back on the floor. Okay, now unlike your hypothesis, this diagram does not show what you demonstrated, that at the time this is supposed to show the shot to the right forearm and the shot that passed right on by and then impacted the upper arm, correct? Yes. And unlike the way that you showed it, this does not show her hand up in the clavicle area. Well, she could have had the hand up in the clavicle area when the shot occurred and then lowered the hand when this occurred. So this one comes first? It could. Of course, the other way around. This one came first and then the hand went up. So it doesn't matter to you where the hand is. It doesn't matter at all. Either way, it's okay? Yes. So you don't know. So basically that means if you don't know where the hand was or how the hand was positioned and which one came first, like you don't know how it happened and you're guessing. So, all right. I remember we started out in the beginning of your report, you indicated that in your hypothesis that Mrs. Menendez fell off or rolled off the couch onto her right side, correct? Let me see the photographs again to refresh. There aren't photographs or photographers, she said. Probably photographs, but the court reporter spelled it wrong. These aren't photographs. This is somebody else's creation. I can show you the photograph. There's no question she was on her right side. Yes, she went forward off the couch and then down onto her right side. And these diagrams don't show her on her right side, do they? She's more on her back. It shows her back in these diagrams. Yes. So do you see anything to support the conclusion that she was on her back? I don't know if she was on her back or not at some time during the shooting process. Okay. You can't say, though, based on your medical opinion, that you can agree with the positioning of this body as being on her back, can you? I don't understand your question. Yeah, I didn't understand that either. All right, there's nothing based on your medical opinion, which is why you're here, upon which you can rely and say that she was on her back. That's correct. I don't know if she was on her back or not. There's nothing that permits me to disagree or agree with that. I'm going to put an X on her back position because you can't support that position medically, correct? Mr. Khan says I'm going to object to that as argumentative, Your Honor. Court says rephrase the question. Can you support medically with any of the medical evidence this positioning of Mrs. Menendez on her back as shown in 224 and 225? We're running into a problem with these diagrams because I want the jury to understand correctly what I'm saying in terms of my agreement or disagreement. Well, with 224 and 225, what we're doing is we're ending up expecting me to be able to prove with medical evidence every aspect of this reconstruction. And you can't, can you? Of course I can't. And what I want the jury to understand is there's no medical evidence that disproves it. It's in general agreement with it. And that's all I'm here to say. Well, we've already shown some we've already shown some where you're not in general agreement, correct? I'd say the major disagreement is the upper arm of Jose. I don't feel that it's the same shot that goes into her breast. And do we have an angle problem here? The others are more minor and what I consider inconsequential differences. Okay, but nobody with any greater medical experience than yours contributed to these as far as you know. Isn't that right? I have no idea who made those up. Now, where are we now on this one, Dr. Lawrence? Objection, vague, sustained. I'm sorry. I should make a record. I'm showing the witness two charts that have the markings on them. The last one I marked was 224. The court says 225. I marked 224 and 225. This one should be 226. Yes, Your Honor. Court says, and this is labeled shot what? 8. This is 8A and 8B. Okay, take a look at those two. The witness says, these show Mrs. Menendez again, still on her back, receiving the shot to her left thigh, going in the top of the thigh and out of the back of the thigh. Yes, that's what I'm asking you. By the time that we were done discussing that wound this morning, it appeared that you were reconsidering whether you thought the top wound was the entry versus the exit. Objection, argumentative, sustained. All right, you indicated that it made sense to you that the top wound was the exit and not the entry, correct? It could be. I just don't know. It's a very difficult one to interpret. That seems to be his answer for just about everything here. Okay, so you can't agree then with that illustration since you don't know if that illustration is correct. Is that right? As I've said before, I cannot prove much of the detail of the scenario with medical evidence. Okay. And I can't disprove any of it or very much of it. Well, the question isn't whether you can disprove it. The question is whether you have a medical opinion that unequivocally supports what that diagram shows. And if I understand you, am I correct in saying you do not? I do not have an opinion that unequivocally supports it. Then I'm putting an X over the part of that diagram. Have you ever testified before, Dr. Lawrence, as an expert for the prosecution in a case when a different coroner's office performed the autopsy and no member of that office was called to testify? It's a great question, but Mr. Khan objects, says it's irrelevant, but the court overrules it and says to the witness, you can answer the question. So, gotta love that. The witness says, I don't know. I've testified for other district attorneys' offices and I never learned what other doctors were involved, so I don't know. Ms. Abramson says, has it ever happened that where you have performed an autopsy and a district attorney failed to call you and instead called in a totally separate expert? Objection, irrelevant, sustained. Let me ask you this, Dr. Lawrence. It may sound silly. Shot pellets are made of metal, correct? Yes. And are you aware of any medical or biological processes whereby if shot pellets go through a human being's leg, they somehow evaporate on the other side? No. Or dematerialize somehow? I get the point. Okay. Did you examine these scene photographs to see if Mr. Menendez had received that wound in the position that he's seated on the couch, whether there is any debris whatsoever from such a shotgun wound in a line from that wound? As I said before, I think the leg might have been closer to the other leg, and my assumption was that the shot probably passed on by. But it had to stop somewhere. Yes. And did you examine the carpet area that extends? There are photographs that show the rest of the carpet. You're aware of that, are you not? I assume there are. I saw some photographs of the scene from different angles. And did you see anything on the carpeting or in any area to the left of Mr. Menendez that looked like what could have been the debris, pellets, tissue, whatever, from that wound? I don't feel comfortable testifying about scene findings. Okay, even though he already has and said that it could have come from the back of the couch, even though there were no wounds or there was no damage to the couch. He really, yeah, he's all over the place. And if you're paying attention, he's very uncredible. But if you're just sitting there kind of like, whatever, and not listening or paying attention, and if you're not a very attentive juror, or you're a juror that just blindly follows the prosecution, you're not going to see the glaring problems with this. But I hope, with people doing YouTube channels and dissecting court cases now, you're seeing the very the big problems in the prosecution's cases because it's glaring to me, but I hope you guys are seeing it. Anyways, he says he doesn't feel comfortable testifying about scene findings. Okay, you'll leave that to the criminologists? Yes. Yes. Criminalists is what I meant to say. And he says yes. But you will use the particular scene finding of only a small pool of blood below that leg to support your post-mortem opinion, correct? Yes, that's in the medical arena. All right. Approximately how many pellets, separate pellets, are there in a round of birdshot? I have no idea. It would be more than 100, I would say. And they're very tiny, are they not? They're quite small. They vary from about an eighth of an inch or even smaller. And when you were talking about the autopsy x ray of Mrs. Menendez, the head view, you talked about a large white area. And you believed that that solid white was caused by the packing of all those pellets in that area? Yes, ma'am, possibly. If I could have a moment, Your Honor, I may be extremely close to done. I just want to make sure I got your testimony before. Was that the angle on Mrs. Menendez of what we've been calling wound number 3, the one that hit the clavicle mandible, was also horizontal, correct? Yes. And the same is true to the one to the left side of her face, was horizontal? Yes. And the one to the right side of her face, the angle was horizontal, neither upward or downward. Yes, ma'am. I don't think I have anything further unless someone wants to tell me I forgot something. Mr. Gessler? Mr. Gessler says you're fine. Ms. Abramson says I'm fine. Thank you, Dr. Lawrence. Any redirect? And Mr. Khan, of course, does have some redirect. So let's see if the state can rehabilitate all of that. Mr. Khan says, Sir, you review the coroner's report prepared by Dr. Golden in this case. Yes. And did you note that I believe you testified earlier today that he was consistent in regard to his description of the wound to Jose Menendez's right arm? Yes. Now, in fact, he was the witness says he was consistent with respect to the upper arm wound, entrance versus exit. Okay. And the witness continues, there was some confusion there was some confusion because he incorrectly mentioned forearm wound, which was not really involved, was not even present. Okay. Directing your attention, do you have a copy of his autopsy report with you? Yes, I do. Okay. And do you have the autopsy report that was written in 1989? Yes. And is that the original autopsy report? Yes. And sometime later, did he write an amendment to that report? Yes. And can you tell us when he wrote that amendment? September 25th, 1995. That's approximately 6 years after this report was written. Objection, Your Honor, leading and argumentative. Overruled. Yes. Now, directing your attention to this 1989 report, did he describe in regard to his right arm, Jose Menendez's right arm, did he describe and identify by number 2 separate wounds to that arm? Page, please. Yes, let me direct your attention to shotgun wound number 2 and shotgun wound number 3. Would you please repeat your question? Yes. Did he describe the wounds to the arm of Jose Menendez as the right arm of Jose Menendez as two separate wounds, which he identified and described separately? Yes. Okay, now shotgun wound number 2. How did he describe that wound, or which wound was he referring to in that description? Wound number 2, he says, is a shotgun wound of the anterior upper arm. That would be the front biceps area on the inside right side and the forearm. So he described it at this area and the forearm. Let me show you an exhibit that has been marked as 216. The wound that he described as shotgun wound number 2. Do you see that wound depicted in the photograph marked 216? Yes. Would you tell us shotgun wound number 2? Oh, yes, this is my way of understanding. He says this is a shotgun wound of the anterior upper arm and the forearm, and I think he means this wound here. Is that the 6 individual pellet defects? I think he may mean that these are the forearm. I'm not sure. There may have been confusion, but I think this is the wound he's talking about. Court says yes for some reason. Mr. Khan says for shotgun number 2, the court says the jurors can't see. Oh, that's why he was addressing one of the jurors. Juror number 9 says there's a glare. Sorry, I got an itch on my nose. The court says, can you just swing the easel over a little bit? The witness says, no help. Court says, any better? A little more, perhaps. Mr. Khan, you can move that easel a little bit so the jurors can see. Mr. Khan says, yes. Let me move it down somewhat. Doctor, does he describe shotgun wound number 2 as consisting of multiple pellet defects located 12 inches below the top of the right shoulder to 12 inches below the top of the right shoulder to 17 inches? Miss Abramson says, excuse me, Your Honor, the question is very confusing. I think counsel misspoke. The court says, okay, did you understand the question? The witness says, yes, I was reading the report at the time he was quoting it, and he says that the wound consists of multiple pellet defects located from 12 inches below the top of the right shoulder to 17 inches. So I think he's referring to 2 separate defects here. What? Mr. Khan says, okay, does he go on to describe shotgun wound number 2 as the individual pellet defects totaling approximately 6 in number? Ms. Abramson says, Your Honor, I'm going to object to counsel reading this. I don't see it that it's, for the purpose it's hearsay, it's leading, and I don't think there's a foundation laid for this hearsay. Court says overruled. The witness says he appears to be describing those pellet defects. He then skips to wounds number 3. Mr. Khan says, okay, before we go on to wound number 3, I'm just asking about wound number 2. Is there any doubt in your mind from reading the report that Dr. Golden described shotgun wound number 2 as consisting of those 6 individual pellet defects? In his original report, that's what he says. Okay, now shotgun wound number 3, how does he describe it? He describes it as the one on the back of the arm, which we can't see. I'm sorry, I keep pointing to this and you can't see it. It's the wound on the back of the arm, and then he says it exists or it exits on the forearm, passing into the forearm, which is incorrect. Well, where does he say that shotgun wound number 3 passes into the forearm? Just a second. I'm sorry. Let me correct myself. This wound is located on the dorsal aspect of the right forearm. So he says it's on the back of the forearm, not the arm. I'm sorry. Okay. So shotgun number 3, according to Dr. Golden, was a wound on the forearm of the right arm. Is that correct? Yes. And does he describe an exit wound that he associates with shotgun wound number 3? He does describe an exit laceration on the medical aspect of the right upper arm, and I think he must be referring to this large gaping wound on the inside of the arm. As a juror, and you're sitting here listening to all this wound's this wound's that, this wound came from this pellet, this blah blah blah. Does it matter to you? To me, I would say no. You're spending so much time differentiating on what direction and where this came and blah blah blah. It doesn't matter to me. As a juror, I'm not as focused, and it's the more you spend time on it, the less I'm going to listen, to be honest. What do you guys think about that? Because I think it's boring and pointless because the damage is done, and regardless of exit, entry, blah, 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 I don't know. I think it's going on too long. Anyways. So he does describe an exit laceration on the medical aspect of the or on the medial aspect of the right upper arm, and I think he must be referring to this large gaping wound on the inside of the arm. Okay, but does he attribute that wound on the upper right arm to shotgun wound number 3 and no other wound? Yes. So let me direct your attention to page 6 of the autopsy report. Does he appear to make reference to shotgun wound number 2 in reference to that particular wound to which you are now referring? I don't understand your question. Okay, you see the photograph that begins with the words also confirming distal proximal. Yes. Okay, so you tell us what distal proximal is? From the hand end of the arm to the shoulder end. From the hand to the shoulder, I guess. Okay, so distal is on the hand end and proximal is the shoulder end. Okay, and the confirmation that he is referring to in his report is confirmation that the entry wound to the forearm was a distal proximal shot. Is that correct? Ms. Abramson says, I'm going to object to that, Your Honor. That's not what the report says, and this report was corrected, and I think this is misleading the jury. The court says he's re-examining the witness and he's doing it in a permissible way, so objection overruled. The witness says there's a lot of confusion in the original report, and it's been cleared up somewhat by the addendum report, okay, which came out 6 years later, by the way. Mr. Khan says, yes. What I'm asking you to do, sir, is to identify for the jury what that confusion was, and then we'll get to how it was cleared up in the addendum. Let's first focus on the original report. Dr. Golden described a wound being an entry wound to the forearm of the right arm. Is that correct? Yes. Okay, and he described the exit wound as being where? On the inside of the arm. Okay. So the exit wound, he's referring to this large wound which appears here in this photograph. Is that correct? Could we move the easel, angle it so they can see? Some of the jurors apparently are. The court says, I think they can see it now. Mr. Khan says, in the photograph 216, that large wound he referred to as being the exit wound. Is that correct? Yes. Doesn't he also indicate in his report that that exit wound could be the exit wound to shotgun wound number 2? Yes. And shotgun wound number 2, you just told us, is what he described as being the 6 individual shotgun pellets, which also appear in this photograph. Is that correct? Yes. So, 1989, when Dr. Golden wrote this report, he indicated that these 6 individual pellets must be the entry and at that large wound must be the exit. Is that correct? Yes. Okay. Now, from 1989 until 1995, did you see any change in opinion from Dr. Golden concerning the entry and the exit wound to that arm? Yes. And when and how did he change his opinion concerning the entry and the exit to that particular wound? Ms. Amerson says, I'm going to object to the question under 352 because this witness was not given his testimony in the trial. The court says, well, I think the reference is to the reports only. Is that correct, Mr. Khan? Mr. Khan says, that is correct, Your Honor. The court says, you're not referring to whatever Dr. Golden testified to in the trial. Mr. Khan says, that's correct, Your Honor. The witness says he amends his description of the wounds as follows, and this is the way he wants to change it. Quote, shotgun wound of the right upper extremity, dorsal aspect through and through, exit on medial aspect of upper arm. So now he's saying that we're dealing with an entrance on the back of the arm and an exit on the inside front of the arm. Mr. Khan says, and when, sir, did he make that change? This year, 1995. 6 years later. Okay, so 6 years after he described that wound that is shotgun wound number 2 as possibly being the entry for the exit that appears in that photograph, it's your understanding that he then changed his opinion and now attributed the entry to another location in the arm. Is that correct? Ms. Abrams says, Your Honor, I'm going to object to the question. Number 1, it's argumentative, and number 2, it ignores his testimony. The court says, well, it's argumentative as phrased, objection sustained. Mr. Khan says, did you see any changes in any reports from Dr. Golden between 89 and 95 when he decided to change his report? No. Ms. Abrams says, objection, Your Honor, it's argumentative and assumes facts not in evidence. Overruled. And there's no foundation to that. The witness says no. So Mr. Khan says, now let me show you the photograph that has been marked 183. Now, this photograph also depicts that same large wound to the upper right arm that we are talking about. Is that correct? Yes. Now, does that photograph also depict when Dr. Golden is now describing as the entry wound? Yes, where the probe is. Okay, so now in 1995, Dr. Golden is saying this is the entry, correct? Yes. Now, how did Dr. Golden describe that back in 1989? The entry? That is what he is now referring to as possibly the entry. Ms. Abrams says, I'm going to object to the form of the question, Your Honor. It misstates the evidence and it assumes other facts that are not in evidence and it's argumentative. Court says, all right, overruled with the clarification. You're asking him how he described it in his original report. Mr. Khan says, yes, Your Honor. Witness says, I can't really tell. Mr. Khan asks, do you see anywhere in the description of shotgun wound number 3 in the 1989 report where he even recognizes that that wound exists? Ms. Abrams says, I'm going to object to the form of the question as well as what Dr. Golden recognizes or doesn't recognize. Rephrase the question. Yes. In the 1995 amendment, he describes that entrance wound as being a ragged entrance defect approximately 2 inches in maximal diameter. Is that correct? Yes. Now, do you see, going back to the 1989 report, while he is describing shotgun wound number 3, do you see any reference to a 2-inch entrance defect? No, that wound is not described in the original autopsy report. So the wound that he is now describing in 1995 as being the entrance he didn't even recognize back in 89? Objection, argumentative, rephrase it without the use of the word recognize. Yes. Ms. Abrams says, and even, Your Honor. Mr. Khan says, the wound that he is now describing as being the entrance in 1995, is there any indication in his original report that he noted that wound? He did not describe it. Instead, he describes some wound to the forearm as being the entrance wound. Yes, a wound that didn't exist. A wound that didn't exist. Yes. Now, in 1995, what does he say about the wound to his forearm? Ms. Abramson says, Your Honor, I'm going to object with respect to counsel's demeanor, as we previously noted to the court. Overruled. In 1995, what did he say about the wound to the forearm, which back in 89 he had referred to as the entrance wound? He doesn't really account for it. I think he made a mistake, and I think he corrected it when he saw the pictures and discussed it at a later time with someone. I don't fault this. These autopsies are extremely difficult, and it's almost impossible to remember every detail of every wound when you're trying to dictate your final report. And sometimes you have to go back and look at the photographs and say, gee, I should say it differently. That's what happened. How do you know you weren't there? And you're also disparaging the person who actually did the autopsy, who they're not calling. So this is kind of crazy here. He goes on to say, but it is admittedly a very confusing situation. These are difficult wounds. Wow. Is that the only mistake that you noted in the reports of Dr. Golden? Well, I wouldn't really characterize any of these as mistakes. I mean, they are errors, but it's just the nature of the game. It's tough to do cases like this and to be exactly consistent, just as it's tough to make these dolls and have them fit exactly the photographs when they're scrutinized at the lowest level of detail. It's just difficult. Well, then don't do it. Don't use the dolls if they're not accurate. So stupid. The question, sir, was that the only discrepancies that you observed in the reports of Dr. Golden? There were others. And which others did you note? I can't, they're very minor, and I can't even recall them now. They did not really affect my opinion. While you saw no other medical opinion for Dr. Golden to change his opinion that the wound to the cheek of Kitty Menendez was a post-mortem wound as opposed to an anti-mortem wound, is that correct? Objection, argumentative, sustained. Also leading. Objection sustained. Thank you. Did you see any medical basis? Well, can you tell us when was it that Dr. Golden decided that the wound to Kitty Menendez's cheek might have been post-mortem rather than anti-mortem? Ms. Abramson says, Objection, Your Honor. It's beyond his personal knowledge when Dr. Golden. Court says sustained. Objection sustained. Mr. Khan says, Did you, in the amendment, in one of the amendments by Dr. Golden, did you note that the wound to Kitty's right cheek was possibly post-mortem as anti-mortem? Ms. Abramson says, Objection to the form of the question assumes facts not in evidence. The court says, rephrase the question. The court asks, let me ask you, how much longer do you think you'll be? Mr. Khan says, a while. The court says, okay, we'll resume tomorrow. So they take their recess for the day. We come back the next morning. So we are now on November 8th. Let me get to the right page here. And the court says, everyone's present. We'll have the jury out, please. They enter the room. The court says, the jury's in the courtroom. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We're ready to resume with the trial. Dr. Robert Don Lawrence, the witness on the stand at the adjournment, having been previously sworn, testifies as follows. He swears in again. Okay. Or comes to the stand again. All right. So redirect continues. Mr. Khan says, Doctor, yesterday, you were shown some diagrams by defense counsel and you were asked whether you agree or disagree with some of the shots or trajectories that are reflected in those diagrams. I would like to show you some of those once again. I'd like to begin by showing you what has already been marked as 222 and 223 for identification, and directing your attention to what appears to be two views of the same shot. Is this the shot, first of all, that represents the shot to the area of the right eye of Kitty Menendez? Yes, it is. And I believe that you indicated in your testimony that you have a slightly different view concerning the precise angle at which that shot struck the face. Is that correct? Yes, a very slight difference. This fairly accurately depicts what I feel is the path of the shotgun wound. All right. I don't know if it's visible to the jury using these small illustrations, but do those illustrations depict a trajectory or a path for the shotgun? Yes. And how is that depicted in these illustrations? It is more or less horizontal, striking the right eye, coming from the victim's right, slightly to the victim's right. So there's sort of a green line going across the diagram, is that correct? Yes. And does that represent or appear to represent the path of the trajectory? Yes. The green line is the trajectory. Okay. What I would like you to do then, if you would, is if you would take this red marker and illustrate on the diagram, perhaps you can use the one that is marked 223, how you would place the trajectory as opposed to the green line that is currently there. The witness does so. Okay, as it is now depicted in this diagram, you have no dispute with that particular diagram as representing where Kitty Menendez or the position of which Kitty Menendez might have taken that shot to the right eye. I'm sorry, I don't understand the question. As you have now drawn that trajectory using a red marker, you have no dispute with the way that the diagram depicts the way that Kitty Menendez might have taken the shot to her right eye. No. And the diagram could even be correct compared to me. I'm imprecise. My best estimate is what I've shown. I could be off a little bit. Okay, all right. So you have no problem with that. Why don't you just place a check mark on 223 at this time? Now, 222 shows the angle full frontal. Is there any way that you can change the line to make it correspond more closely to how you view the angle or trajectory to her right eye? No. All right, so then just place a check mark. Let me go through some additional diagrams with you. But before I move on from that particular shot that you just referred to, let me ask you, do you have, in your own medical opinion, do you have any dispute with the manner in which that diagram represents the shot that Kitty Menendez took to her right eye? Ms. Abramson says, I'm going to object, Your Honor. The question is too vague. Much of that has nothing to do with medical opinion. The court says, do you understand the question? The witness says, I think so. Court says, you may answer it. The witness says, no. Mr. Khan says, you have no medical basis upon which you can disagree with what is reflected in the diagram. Is that correct? None at all. Okay, all right, let's move on then to two other diagrams that were shown to you. This is 226 and 227, and these appear to represent a shot that Kitty Menendez received to her to her left thigh. That is the through and through wound to her left thigh. Now, yesterday, during the examination by defense counsel, she made a red mark or a red X on each of these diagrams. Do you have any dispute with the manner in which those diagrams depict the shot that Kitty Menendez received to her left thigh? No, sir. Those look fine to me. Okay, and is there any medical basis upon which you can conclude that the shots, that is, the shot to Kitty's thigh, her left thigh, did not occur as depicted in these diagrams? No. All right, then I would ask you to place a check mark on each of those two. Two more diagrams that were shown to you yesterday were 224 and 225. Once again, as with the ones that I previously put up on the board, these represent two views of the same shot. Is that correct? Yes. And here, this appears to represent the shot that Kitty Menendez received to two parts of her right arm, that is, the right forearm and the right upper arm. Once again, counsel, I believe, during her examination of once again, counsel, I believe, during her examination of you, made a red X on the top one, which has been marked 224. Do you have any dispute with the way that these illustrations depict that shot to the right arm of Kitty Menendez? No, sir. All right. And do you have any medical basis upon which you can conclude that the shots did not occur in the manner depicted in these illustrations? No. All right. Once again, I would ask you then to place a red mark on each of these two illustrations. I have two more illustrations which appear to depict the shot to the left cheek of Mrs. Menendez. I'll mark these at this time as 228 and 229. The court says, do we have 227? The clerk says, we straightened it out. Mr. Khan says, showing you 228 and 229, do those two illustrations appear to depict the same shot? 228 being a shot looking from the ceiling down to the floor, and 229 depicting a frontal view of the same shot. Yes. And as you look at those illustrations, do you have any disagreement, once again, basing your opinion upon the trajectory, which is represented by a green line into the face area of the mannequin? Do you have any disagreement with the way that those illustrations depict the shot received by Kitty Menendez to her left cheek? No. And is there any medical basis upon which you can say that the shot did not occur as depicted in those illustrations? No. So once again, I would ask you to, if you would, place a red check mark on those. I have two additional illustrations which appear to depict the shot to the left shoulder area and left head area of Kitty Menendez. I'll mark these as 230 and 231. Once again, do these two illustrations appear to depict the same shot two from two different angles? That is, 230 being the shot looking down from the ceiling and 231 being the shot or the view from the full frontal point of view. Yes. And once again, based upon the manner in which the trajectory is depicted in those illustrations by a green bar, and based upon your review of the autopsy reports and the photographs and x-rays, do you have any disagreement with the way that the shot is depicted in 230 and 231? No, sir. Do you have any medical basis upon which you can conclude that shot is not accurately depicted? No. Once again, I would ask you, if you would, then to make a red mark on each of these. I have two more illustrations which I'll mark at this time, 232 and 233, showing you those illustrations. Do these illustrations appear to depict the same shot from two different angles? Angle 223 being the shot from the ceiling down, and the angle from the ceiling down to the ground, and 233 the view from the back of the sofa towards the coffee table. Yes. And once again, basing your opinion upon the material that you reviewed in the case, the autopsy reports and the x-rays and photographs, do you have any dispute with the way that these illustrations depict what appears to be that through and through wound that went through the lower part of the left leg of Kitty Menendez, and which emerged through the top part of her left leg? Through the thigh, I have no dispute. Is there any medical basis upon which you can say that these illustrations do not accurately depict the shot that Kitty Menendez received to those two places in her leg? No. All right, once again, I would ask you to make a red check mark then on each of those illustrations. I'm now marking two additional illustrations as 234 and 235. Once again, I ask you if the top illustration, which has been marked as 234, appears to be another view of the bottom illustration, which has been marked as 235. Yes, this is such a mouthful to get out these words. Like, these questions are so long. Do both of those illustrations appear to depict the injury that Kitty Menendez received to her left calf area? Yes. And based upon your review of the autopsy reports and photographs and x-rays, do you have any disagreement with the manner in which this particular shot is depicted in those illustrations? No, sir. Is there any medical basis upon which you can conclude that those illustrations do not accurately represent the shot that was received to the left calf area of Kitty Menendez? No. Once again, I would ask you to make a red check mark on each of those. All right, the next two illustrations I'm marking as 236 and 237. I would like to ask you if 236, which is the illustration that I have placed on the top of the board, appears to be another view of the same shot that is depicted in 237, which appears just beneath that. Yes. And do both of those illustrations appear to depict the shot that was fired into the left leg of Jose Menendez? Yes. And based upon your review of all that stuff, do you see any basis upon which you can disagree with the shot as it is depicted in those illustrations? No, sir. Is there any medical basis that you can think of that would cause you to conclude that those illustrations do not accurately depict the shot to Jose Menendez? No. Once again, I would ask you to place red check marks on each of these. I am now marking exhibits 238, 239, two more illustrations in this series of illustrations. I'm placing those on the board at this time. Does 238, which is the top illustration, appear to depict the same shot from a different point of view of 239, which is the illustration at the bottom? Yes, they both show the shot that went through the hand and the collarbone area of Kitty Menendez. Okay. And based upon your review of the autopsy reports and the x-rays and the photographs in this case, do you have any basis upon which you can disagree with the shots as they are? That shot as it is depicted in those two illustrations? No. Is there any medical basis upon which you can conclude that those illustrations do not accurately depict the shot to Kitty Menendez? No, sir. Once again, I ask you to make a red mark on those. Next two illustrations will be marked 240 and 241. I'm placing those illustrations on the board. Do these two illustrations appear to be two illustrations of the... We've already done those. Okay, the illustrations that I'm marking as 241 and 240 appear to be two illustrations to the... Let me just have one moment. Do you have 224 and 225 in front of you? I think we're dealing with two shots, portions of two sets. Mr. Khan says... May I take a look at those? We'll move on to, I believe the next in sequence would be 240 and 241. The court says you were in the process of marking 240 and 241 and aborted that. So those will be the next two. Mr. Khan says, okay, the ones I am now marking as 240 and 241 appear to depict the shot to the head of Jose Menendez. I would like to place this on the board and ask you at this time, do these two illustrations appear to depict two views of that same single shot? Yes, sir. And once again, based upon the material that you reviewed in this case, including the autopsy reports and the photographs and x-rays, do you have any basis upon which you can disagree with the manner in which that shot is depicted in each of these two illustrations? No, I can't. Do you have any medical basis upon which you can conclude that those illustrations do not accurately depict the manner in which Jose was shot to the back of the head? No. Once again, let me give those to you and ask you to mark those at this time with a check mark. All right. Now, before we move on to the last one, which would be the shot of Jose and Kitty Menendez on the sofa, let me ask you some questions about some of those that we have gone through already. In regard to the shot that went through the upper thigh of Kitty Menendez, that is the through and through shot. You were asked a series of questions yesterday concerning which of the wounds to her upper thigh was the entrance and which was the exit. Do you recall that? Yes. And do you recall that after recess, defense counsel asked you that having had an opportunity to speak with myself and other persons, whether you had changed your opinion concerning that particular shot. Do you recall that question? Yes. Just to clarify for the record, what is your opinion concerning that particular shot that is to the upper thigh of Kitty Menendez? My position remains that it is from the front of the thigh to the back. Now directing your attention to the wound to the cheek. To the left cheek of Kitty Menendez, that is the wound that you identified as the contact wound you brought with you. Did you not a photograph to depict a wound that shows a lack of hemorrhaging around the wound? Is that correct? Yes, sir. That's from a homicide case of mine. And can you tell us why it is that you brought this photograph, which has been marked as 211, with you to court when you came to testify in regard to this matter? I received a telephone call from the public defender's office in which the attorney and I had a discussion about the contact wound in Kitty's left cheek, and it was the feeling of... Ms. Amos says, Your Honor, I'm going to object to this as hearsay, whatever was in that telephone conversation. The court says the content of the conversation is hearsay. His answer is he brought in his response to a conversation he had with somebody in the public defender's office. Is that right? The witness says, yes, sir. Court says, okay. Mr. Khan says, all right, let me show you what has also been marked 196 for identification. I'll place that on the board at this time. Was there something that you wish to illustrate? Could you put that a little further to the left so the other one shows in the entirety? And is there... No, that conversation. Ms. Abramson says, I'm going to object to the conversation. Mr. Khan says, without going into the conversation. Sustained. Mr. Khan says, just let me ask you what it is that you were attempting to depict by bringing this photograph with you in relation to this wound which appears on Kitty's left cheek. The wound on her left cheek consists of a circular defect with no hemorrhage or bruising around it. For that reason, one might think it may be post-mortem, and there was no bleeding under the skin as a result of the wound. Dr. Golden, in his autopsy, did describe bleeding inside. As you can see from the photograph, there's no bruising around it. I brought the other photograph of another case to illustrate that in a contact shotgun wound that is antemortem, you can have absolutely no bruising or hemorrhage in the surrounding skin. This wound on the right is from a case that I autopsied in which the person was shot once with a shotgun with a contact wound, so we know he was alive at the time that he was shot, and we see absolutely no hemorrhage around the hole. And based upon the fact that bleeding was observed inside the wound by Dr. Golden, and based upon the wound as it appears in that photograph depicting Menendez, would you have an opinion as to whether or not that was postmortem or antemortem? Not really, I can't be sure. And why is that? There are other shotgun wounds involving the head on this victim, and they could cause hemorrhage, and are pellets crisscrossing and so forth. So I cannot be sure if the internal hemorrhage was due to the shotgun wound or one of the others. I have no opinion about antemortem, perimortem, or postmortem. In regard to the wound of the left leg of Jose Menendez, I believe that you said in response to a question from counsel that the reason why you would conclude that wound was a post-mortem wound was because you would expect there to be more bleeding to that wound than you observed at in the photo of the crime scene. Is that correct? Yes. Now, you premised your belief that there would be more bleeding than was observable in the photo of the crime scene upon your conclusion that you would expect there to be more, I believe you called it arterial damage to the leg. Vascular damage, yes, sir. And what did you mean by vascular damage? Disruption or injury of blood vessels causing hemorrhage. Can you describe the blood vessels that you would expect to find in that particular portion of the leg? That area there is the largest vessel is the femoral artery, and it's about a little bit larger than a pencil in diameter, and it passes down right along the backside of the femur, right in the area where it was shattered from the gunshot wound. And then it gives off branches that go into the femur itself and also branches into the surrounding soft tissue, and those main branches are about the size of the pencil lead, and any of those vessels, if shattered, would cause significant and obvious hemorrhage. Let me show you the photo that has been marked 182 and the x-ray that has been marked 176. Can you tell us specifically where the femoral artery is located? If you look at the x-ray, which is number 186, the femoral artery would come right down to the soft tissues right behind the femoral bone. At this point, it would become the popliteal artery, and he spells it, which is also a popular or similar vessel, a similar size vessel. It's also popular. No, just kidding. I'm just dumb and can't read. If you look at the x-ray, you can see a track of tissue destruction. This dark area caused by the passage of the shot pellets, and you also see that there are no pellets left in there. So all the pellets went through, created a large defect, and on out. There's no way that the femoral artery would avoid injury under those circumstances. We're not talking about one bullet, we're talking about 27 buckshot. It was brought out during cross-examination yesterday that in your initial report, which you prepared prior to your testimony, you indicated in one place of your report your conclusion that following the first shot to Kitty Menendez, she may have jumped up from her position. Objection misstates the testimony and the report. Overruled. Do you recall indicating yesterday or testifying yesterday that she may have jumped up following the first shot? Yes, sir. That's not what I said in my report, but I did say that yesterday. Okay, So the words that you used in your report, did you use the words that she may have rolled from the sofa? Rolled forward off the couch. Yes, sir. Okay, can you tell us why you used both of those descriptions, which appear to be contradictory in describing the movement of Kitty Menendez following the first shot? We know that she was seated on the couch when she was first hit. We know, well, we don't know that. You're just guessing. We know that the body was found on the floor in front of the couch. How she got there could be in several ways. She could have jumped up and been hit again and collapsed. She could have rolled forward off the couch. She could have crouched down and fallen off the couch. She could have, in attempting to dive away from the couch, get away and then fallen backward. There are many possibilities, and I don't know which one is the true one. Now, in regard to the shot to the back of Jose Menendez's head, you indicated during cross examination that his head was in a different position when he was shot than it is depicted in this photograph of the crime scene. 201 is the one of them which depicts his head tilted towards the right side. Can you tell us why you concluded that his head was in a different position at the moment he was shot than the position that is depicted in that photograph? I can based on common sense and not on medical evidence. The medical evidence would be he could not have been shot with his head in that position, also from behind. It's just that it's such an unnatural position, I could not imagine a reason why he would be sitting there in that position. But that's basically a common sense idea. This guy is one of the. This guy is a terrible witness. You can't go off of common sense as an expert. Like, I mean, yes, all of us have common sense. The jurors have common sense, but you're an expert. You're supposed to provide expert type opinions, and you're supposed to give us reason why. That was just a bunch of malarkey that you just threw at us. So, when you gave the opinion that his head would have been in a different position, what variation are we talking about then? Just a more erect position of the head? Yes. All right, now directing your attention to the two illustrations which depict the or appear to represent the bodies of Kitty and Jose Menendez, and which have been marked as 220 and 221 for identification. Once again, are those two illustrations, do they appear to be two illustrations of the same shot from two slightly different angles? Yes. And you indicated yesterday during your testimony that it is your opinion that Kitty and Jose Menendez were sitting at the time that the shots were fired. And what was your basis for that conclusion? The blood pattern on the couch, he says. That's the only reason. The blood pattern on the couch. How about the fact that there was no damage to the couch where they would have been seated? How about that? And what was it about the blood pattern on the couch that caused you to reach that conclusion? When the bodies were removed from the couch, one can see two areas where two sets of thighs protected the couch from blood spatter or smear and so forth. Wouldn't it do it if you were standing up against the couch too and your legs were there? I mean, same thing. If you're standing, that doesn't prove anything. Now, yesterday, on direct examination, you were asked whether all the wounds to the right arm of Jose Menendez, that is, the wounds to the six individual pellet defects, as well as the wounds to the upper right arm, would have been consistent with one shot. And you indicated in your direct examination that, in fact, it would be consistent with one shot. Do you recall that? Ms. Abramson says objection misstates his testimony. The court says his direct examination yesterday? Yes, says Mr. Khan. The court says he was only on cross examination yesterday. Ms. Abramson says misstates his testimony both ways. Mr. Khan says the day before. The court says, why don't you rephrase the question? Mr. Khan says, yes. Do you recall testifying that at one point during the cross of your examination that the wounds to Jose, the right arm of Jose Menendez, would have been consistent with one shot? Ms. Abramson says, I'm objecting, Your Honor. It misstates the witness's testimony. The court says he's just asking whether he recalls it. Overruled. The witness says, I don't recall saying it that way. There was a lot of discussion about that wound, and many, many things were said. It is possible that all were caused by the same shot. Mr. Khan says, now on the diagram that has been marked as 220 and 221, do you recall being asked that you did not disagree with the positions of the victims as they are shown in all of the diagrams prepared in this case, indicating that you do not disagree with those diagrams. Do you recall that? I do not disagree with those diagrams. Okay, directing your attention to the specific or these two specific diagrams, 220 and 221. Those diagrams appear to depict the bodies of Jose and Kitty Menendez sitting together, and it may not be visible to the jury at this point, but there appears to be a trajectory or a line painted in green which goes through into the left elbow of Jose Menendez across the front of his chest and then into the right arm and the left breast area of Kitty Menendez. Do you have any disagreement with an illustration depicting that at least one of the shots in this case fired in along that particular trajectory, causing damage to both the left arm of Jose Menendez, the right arm of Jose Menendez, and the breast of Kitty Menendez? I have no disagreement. Okay, is there any? In other words, the trajectory shows that the shot struck the left elbow, the right arm, and Kitty's left breast, and I agree with that. What I'm still uncertain about is the larger gaping wound, and I'm not sure if that's all part of the same shot because, which is possible, but I'm just not sure. I think it may, I think it may not be. It may be a separate shot. There are other shots that are definitely from the same trajectory. Okay. Now, you were shown a photograph yesterday of the left breast area of Kitty Menendez, which also depicts a number of pellet wounds to her right arm. I'm sorry, her left arm. Do you recall that photograph? Not offhand. Okay, let me see if I can find it. I'll move on to another area. You were questioned in regard to what appears to be abrasions to the chest of Jose Menendez, and you were asked about the possible cause of the abrasions to the chest. Do you recall that? Yes. Now, you indicated that it was your belief that those abrasions might have been caused by some surface brushing up against the chest wall. Is that correct? Objection misstates the testimony. Overruled. Yes, I indicated those abrasions were probably due to a shot passing in a grazing fashion along that area, causing a fabric burn or a fabric abrasion of the chest, which is just ridiculous. Never heard of anything like that. Okay, and you were asked by defense counsel whether you would expect to find a hole in the shirt that he was wearing at the time of the shooting caused by this type of contact between the pellets and the chest. Is that correct? Yes, and I said there probably would be. Since that time, have you had an opportunity to look at the shirt? Yes, sir. Mr. Khan says, Your Honor, I have in court a bag containing a bloody shirt. I would ask that this be marked as 242 for identification. The court agrees. Ms. Abramson says, Your Honor, the people did not show us this exhibit before now, and we'd like an opportunity to see it before it's shown to the witness. The court says, You haven't seen it before? Ms. Abramson says, Never. She's never seen Jose's shirt before. So it's never been turned over to them in evidence. Court says, has it been here in court? Or Mr. Khan says, it was just brought down, Your Honor. The court says, all right, certainly, we'll let counsel review it before you get to that. Do you have any other questions of the witness? Mr. Khan says, yes, I do. Let me show you the photograph that I was referring to a moment ago, 187. It is a photograph which depicts the left breast area of Kitty Menendez and also depicts some wounds to her left arm. Is there any way that you can determine just from looking at the photograph whether the wounds to the left arm were necessarily caused by the same shot as opposed to some other random shot? No, sir. Now, sir, you were shown yesterday some of the illustrations to which you have testified here in court today, and I showed you some additional illustrations. You have, however, brought those mannequins or so-called dolls with you to court. For purposes of your examination and depiction of the wounds in this case, which do you feel more accurately represents your opinions concerning the injuries that were inflicted in this case? I think they're both fairly good representations. I would choose the dolls as the ones that I worked on and spent the most time with and I feel most comfortable with. Okay, but you said on your cross and possibly even direct that there were multiple mistakes, multiple variances that were off. So we had to correct them on cross. And I feel the same way as I did when I first made them, that they are accurate as possible under the circumstances. And you made some, there is that one leg that has the wrong direction, but other than that, they're quite accurate. Yes, with the exception of that modification that you noted before the jury, do those dolls appear to be substantially accurate or for purposes of demonstrating your testimony for the jury? Yes, sir. Mr. Khan says, with the exception of the shirt, Your Honor, I have no further direct examination. The court says, okay, we'll take our break here and let you do that. So, with that, I'm going to stop. We will pick up right here where we leave off tomorrow in tomorrow's stream. And well, I don't know if we're going to finish him tomorrow, but we'll get closer to the end of his testimony. He's obviously, there's going to be some redirect, a recross and redirect. So we'll get to that tomorrow. So thank you guys so much for watching. I certainly appreciate you all for being here. Please don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, comment, let me know what you guys think, and I will see you guys in the next episode. Take care. Bye now.